wasn't always afraid of the dark. In fact, I used to find comfort in it, quiet, peaceful, predictable. But that was before the knocking started. Before I realized that the real horror wasn't outside my door, but already inside my apartment. This is not just a story about grief or loneliness. It's about something far worse. Something that doesn't knock to be let in, because it's already here. Beat that like button and subscribe, and lock in. The first thing you should know about me is that I'm a bit of a night owl. Usually I'll just go to bed when the sun is about to go up, and this is an old habit for me. I was homeschooled, and by some sheer miracle, my mom never minded that I would go to bed at such odd hours. She herself was agoraphobic, and I suspect also had some degree of schizophrenia and worked primarily from home as an accountant. She was gracious enough to make her schedule based on mine. Despite all her troubles, she cared for me to the best of her abilities. I guess that's just what moms do. Anyway, she passed 2.5 years ago, and since I'm the only one left, my father disappeared when I was 10 and I've never seen him since, and my grandparents were dead. I got the property we lived in. The house was massive and way too old and secluded for me to continue living in it alone. Even if I had had someone with me, it would be too painful to stay. Too many memories of my mom. I figure it would be better to sell it to a new expanding family and move somewhere bigger and busier. So that's what I did. I got a good amount of money for the property and bought a small 2-bedroom apartment in Toronto. I've got friends in the city I met online a couple of years ago, so I don't feel too lonely in here. 3 nights ago, around 2 a.m., I was sitting on the couch eating some leftover pizza from the day before and binge watching my 7th of The Office episode in a row when there was a knock at the door. Mind you that before I moved in, a lonesome woman from the building died of natural causes, and since she had no relatives, it took them about 1 month to find out she was dead. Apparently, the juices from her decomposing body soaked through the floor into the ceiling of her downstairs neighbors, falling in disgustingly putrid little droplets on their living room. That's how they found out. The smell is always a dead giveaway. No pun intended, of course. So when I heard the knocking, I found the timing to be really weird, but it didn't really strike me as something other than an overly concerned neighbor with a terrible case of guilt-driven insomnia. As I fumbled through my belongings in the dark looking for my mask, I asked who it was but heard nothing. As I approached the door to open it, my hand just inches away from the handle. The knock came again, stronger this time. I stopped, my hand frozen mid-motion. I asked once again, but this time with a shakiness in my voice I did not recognize. I got silence in return. I finally looked in the peephole, only to find the corridor completely empty. I took a deep breath and convinced myself that it was probably one of the kids from the end of the hallway playing a prank on me. They always looked like the mischievous type, and even quarantine did not stop them from running around the hallways every other day. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and relief washed over me as the sun came up. I had almost forgotten the strange occurrence when, in the following night, it happened again. I had spent the better part of the day drinking my isolation-driven loneliness into oblivion when I began smelling something weird somewhere around the kitchen. I couldn't pinpoint where exactly, so I went through my fridge and cabinets looking for whatever had gone bad so I could throw it away. I found nothing. Maybe a mouse had gotten in and died somewhere in the kitchen, I didn't know. Something stank, that much I was certain of. When I was about to place all the food back inside the fridge, I heard the knocking again. It surprised me so much that I lost my grip on the pickle jar, and it smashed against the floor. My heart was pounding so fast I could almost feel the blood rushing through my veins. It made me lightheaded and somewhat confused, the white from my walls blending in with the pale spots across my vision. Maybe that was how it felt to have a heart attack. Walking slowly and ever so carefully across the now sharp and wet surface towards the front door, it dawned on me, finally, that the reason for my panic weren't the knocks per se, but where they were coming from. Fighting against my better judgment, I turned around and my eyes landed on the spare bedroom's door, inside the apartment. It came from inside the apartment. I thought about just bolting out the front door and into the hallway, but before my mind could decide anything, the handle began to turn, twisting slowly as the dry metal squeaked. My body moved on its own accords, taking me towards my bedroom and further into the space, inside the apartment. It came from inside the apartment. Locking myself in the safety of my bedroom, I tried to erase from my mind the spare second when, stealing a glance at the other bedroom's door, I could swear I saw a grayish, bony hand about to cross the threshold. It's safe to say I did not sleep that night. Morning came once again, and with it a momentary relief, a glimpse of hope that I would find solace within the light that flooded my small apartment, but it was short-lived. Night would come eventually. I reached out to one of my neighbors to ask them if they had experienced any kind of pranks or disturbances lately. I did not dare to say the G word out loud, not even to myself. The woman that lived across the hall from me said, from the slit of her barely open door, she didn't notice anything different, sorry. The one next door to her wasn't even home when I knocked, or at least that's what I think. I thought I heard muffled footsteps right after I knocked on the door, but anyway, doesn't matter. In a last attempt to avoid the fading light alone, I called 2 of my friends to see if I could crash on their apartments, or if one of them could come and stay with me, but nothing came of it. They thought it was too dangerous to expose themselves to new environments when things were still so uncertain and not at all contained. Can't say I blame them, really. Alana offered to video chat with me throughout the night, but it felt stupid to be worrying about something that most likely wasn't even real when there's a genuine crisis happening all around us. I politely declined and after chatting for a little while, said my goodbyes. Needless to say, I was alone. A voice in my head that sounded surprisingly similar to my dad's harsh one kept telling me I was losing it. Just like your mom, it said. You're going crazy just like your mom, kid. You are insane. Over and over again. And maybe I was. Maybe my sanity had always been hanging on by a thin thread, and social isolation had finally driven me to the end of my wits. It wouldn't be unprecedented or even uncommon either. Everyone is struggling too, Annie. You're not special just because you're in pain. My father in my head said again, and I was forced to agree. The facts were by increasing order of their absurdity. I was smelling things, I was hearing things, and I was had seen something as well. All of them could be explained by mundane reasons such as dirty pipes or a bad smell coming from some other apartment, the kids playing pranks on me, and maybe even a sneaky infestation of black mold spreading underneath the new wallpaper, making me see things that don't exist. Or maybe you were just losing your mind. Maybe. Either way, things could be explained. Repeating those words to myself like a mantra, I prepared for the night to come. And sure enough, the third night rolled around, and with it the certainty of my arguments mattered less and less, the further the clock ticked. I watched the pointer circling around as if my life depended on it. 10, 11, and then midnight. I was sweating, shaking, and so fucking hungry, but I didn't dare to move from my place inside the frail safety of my bedroom. Time seemed to drag endlessly the more I looked at the clock, but I couldn't take my eyes away from it. A watched pot never boils, kid. It may get a little warm, but never hot enough to be of any use. 1 in the morning and then 2. I was trying to remain calm, but in the back of my mind, all I could think about was that thing knocking on my door. Again. I knew it was coming when I caught a whiff of the smell. God, what an awful smell. Like a fat chunk of putrid, decomposing flesh had just materialized itself somewhere on the other side of the door. Even though I covered my mouth and nose, hoping that I wouldn't feel it anymore, it got stronger. It burned through my nostrils as if I had dived headfirst into a pool, and on instinct I gagged. I barely had any time to recompose when I heard it again. 1 knock, and then right after the second. Soft this time, almost lazy even, like when I was engrossed in a good book and my mother wanted to call my attention, but not disturb my train of thoughts. Who's there? Such a mundane sound. I must have heard it hundreds of times before. It suddenly turned into my worst nightmare. Suddenly, the handle made a cracking noise and twisted all the way around. No such luck, kid. The gentle creaking of the wood told me the door had been open. Like a moth flying towards her inevitable demise in the flames, my eyes focused onto the open door. 2 impossibly thin arms emerged from the darkness, the long nails carving themselves deep into the wood, making way for an equally frail body to drag itself across the floor. The eyes were nothing but 2 blank, milky white spheres, lifeless, vacant, and yet it felt like she was looking directly at me. Pathetically, I crawled back towards the bathroom door, my last refuge. In my state of confusion, she grabbed one of my ankles, and I watched as the skin surrounding her decomposing hand began to sprout with black veins. I kicked and screamed and somehow managed to lock myself inside. With nowhere else to go, I curled into a little ball on the far end of the bathroom, trying to make myself disappear, but I wouldn't. Neither would she. The black veins were spreading from my ankle to my calf and then my knee. It wouldn't take long before they covered my entire leg. Desperate and terrified, I thought of my mom and hoped that the memory of her would somehow appease my heart. It didn't. My mind was a mess of unrelated moments and foggy thoughts. My heartbeat rang inside my ears, so fucking loud. Outside, I could hear her long nails dragging across the door, playing with the wood underneath her fingertips, like a child appreciating a new toy she's about to break. Closing my eyes, I braced myself for the inevitable. Sooner or later, she would knock on this door too. Was the knocking a warning or an invitation? I'm curious to know, what do you think about all this?